Hello, students. Today we're going to talk about the concept of colorblind racism and some pretty important ways it affects our societal structures today. Have you ever heard any of these phrases? Like talking about racism brings in racism, we're all the same, why does everything have to be about race, or even I don't see color? These are some pretty common phrases you'll hear when talking about racial issues with people, and they're pretty harmful. You see, these phrases are tied into something called colorblind racism, and it's kind of a increasingly prevalent form of racism that we're seeing today in societies, especially from people who might view themselves as not racist. The problem is these statements will dismiss unique experiences and challenges, overlook how certain groups are affected, and pass current social structures, silence conversations around real issues, and stigmatize attempts to start conversations about those issues. Now, these are a few examples, but before we go on, I think we really need to understand what do we mean when we say colorblind racism? Well, if you look at our reading from Vanilla Silva, uh, the belief that ignoring or minimizing race will eliminate racism, often leading to further perpetuation of inequality by failing to confront racist aspects of society. Or, if you want the Wikipedia path, racial colorblindness refers to the belief that a person's race or ethnicity should not influence their legal or social treatment in society. The multicultural psychology field generates four beliefs that constitute the racial colorblindness approach. Now, we'll go over those frames in a second, but really put it down into simple terms. Colorblind racism is where someone thinks that they do not see color, but in doing so, they are allowing or perpetuating some things that affect marginalized groups. Uh, you know, I don't see color. You and I had the exact same opportunities, such as education, but discounting the fact that this person's school was way better off than the person from a marginalized community school district may have been. Now, the four frames of colorblind racism we're going to look at, also from our Manila Silva reading, is abstract liberalism. We all get the same opportunities. This is where, people are kind of ignoring the systematic racism or barriers for marginalized group. And just because, both of you are allowed to do a thing, doesn't mean that both of you had the equal chance of doing it. Naturalization, human nature to stick with your own kind. This is where people will kind of discount our major societal issues or racial tensions by saying it's part of the evolution or human experience. Cultural racism. These people need to work harder. I'm sure many people have heard older generations say something like this people needs to do that, our people do this. It's very much seen a lot, but it's essentially just people getting a generalized view of a specific group and associating aspects to that entire group, or even their own group sometimes. Um, Minimization. It's really not that big of a deal as it used to be. Essentially, the idea that because, in the past, people used to be slaves, that they can't complain about things that are happening now, which, has its pretty obvious issues. Like you disregard our modern issues, get rid of any attempts at improvement just because things were worse back then. But, we're always striving for improvement. So it's pretty clear how these four frames can be pretty harmful to people. Uh, and one of the biggest ways we can see colorblind racism existing in our world today and in our country today is in our criminal justice system, unfortunately. The idea that justice is blind is something I'm sure we've all heard, and it's a lot of symbology in our justice system. But in reality, a lot of marginalized groups are targeted. We can see from the 13th documentary that politicians said that policies and the war on drugs, mandatory sentencing policies were made to target specifically marginalized populations that they want to target for whatever their political reasons may be. We have those statements recorded. We have, the facts chart here for prison policy initiative example is shows just, our U.S. population by ethnicity versus the population within our correctional facilities by that same ethnicity. And there's some pretty disproportionate numbers there. So while a lot of people want to believe, and ideally we should be able to believe in our justice system, the truth is that it masks how political motivated policies will be used to punish and bring further harm on our marginalized communities. This can be seen again even in our own school systems. Similar to our prison policies, we have a lot of harsh school punishment policies of suspensions, expulsions, continuation schools, all of which that by research time and time again shows that our, you know, marginalized students of marginalized backgrounds are getting a lot more harsher punishments than our white students are. You know, kids who do the same acts are walking away with slaps on the wrists, while others are getting removed from the school entirely. And that's where it leads to a pretty important component to our school to prison pipeline that we all have major issues with today. Now, this is where we can see it today. And now we understand, what is it? How is it being used in our societal structures? Now the question is, what do we do about it? And that's something we're going to go more over in part two, as where we'll go, some practices we can use to combat this, as well as address, more research into the sources who are we're using to back up our statements. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.